they're not aliens. UFOs are being acknowledged by the highest echelons of our government. The bridging of data across the globe through the common use of computer networks, leading to better coordination and understanding, and also making it harder for anything to remain hidden. The new term, USO, or Unidentified Sunken Object, for UFO sightings by reliable military personnel recounts and video footage from our oceans. Atlantis, the mysterious and technologically advanced city of myth. The Bermuda Triangle, an area in the Atlantic Ocean that has garnered its own stories of mystery. I'm not some nutjob conspiracy theorist. At least that's not how I have ever envisioned myself. I'm just a mechanical engineer at an aluminum plant. I lived in a small house, off the grid, about 20 minutes outside of city limits, on the opposite side of town from the plant. I had a decent commute every day, but at least my time wasn't spent in traffic. That's one thing I'm grateful for, not living in a big city. One night in late winter, I had to work late to get some designs done before the next day. I drove home that evening in pitch black. About 15 minutes outside of town and not too far away from home, my pickup stalled. However, I did not go flying forwards. There was a bright light all around me, so bright it hurt my eyes to try to open them all the way. I had been abducted. I woke laying naked on a flat, cold metal table within a 10-foot metal room. I was not restrained. They must not have expected me to wake up. There was a small tray next to the table, and on it appeared to be medical tools. However, they weren't like any medical tools I've ever seen. I grabbed what looked closest to a scalpel just as a rectangular shape opened in the wall. I leapt to my feet and attacked the gray intruder by slashing it diagonally across the chest. When I saw some blackish liquid start to drip out, I got sick to my stomach, but then I realized it wasn't blood. Holy shit! They're just remote controlled. This thing was nothing more than a robotic avatar. It put its hand on me, and my world went black again. I woke up in my truck the next morning, went home, took a shower, got to work late, got written up, and went on about my life as though nothing had happened. I never told anyone about my abduction, but I never let it go either. I've been doing my own research since the incident, and when you add it all up, it's so blatantly obvious, it's almost insulting that it's all been covered up so well. We aren't being visited by beings who came from elsewhere. We're being visited by another, much more advanced, human civilization who has been hiding under our seas, which have offered them complete camouflage until our technology began to make our world smaller. UFO in the Desert. One afternoon in 1959, my grandfather was on duty at Nellis Air Force Base, located in the Las Vegas desert. He held the rank of Master Sergeant and was an aircraft mechanic. The day was as regular as any other, nothing out of the ordinary, just a long day of maintenance on the aircraft. As the sun set, and my grandfather and his crew were wrapping up work on a B-52, a call came down to have 2 F-105s fueled and loaded, ready for takeoff in 5 minutes. My grandfather and his crew hurried the preparations, and they were ready to go. Word leaked out that an unidentified object was seen on radar hovering around French Mountain. The tower tried contacting the aircraft, but it did not receive a response. The two pilots being sent out to intercept the aircraft was a Captain Roger Phillip, my grandfather's brother-in-law, and a Lieutenant Richard Marks, my grandfather's best friend. They scrambled the jets and took off towards the mountains. My grandfather and his crew ran out of the hangar and watched in concern. After about 5 minutes, the crew on the ground could see bright flashes in the night sky. The jets were shooting at the unidentified aircraft. A minute later, they could see an explosion from the mystery aircraft, with a flame trailing behind it, until it crashed into the side of Sheep's Peak Mountain, which caused a huge explosion the crew could see from the base. Rescue crews were sent out, but nothing is known what was brought back. The pilots and my grandfather's crew were ordered to stay quiet and were threatened with a court-martial if they did not follow orders. My grandfather, the first chance he got, when alone with his brother-in-law, asked what he saw up there. He said it was something he'd never seen before. It was a shiny metallic-like material he had never seen. There were no windows, no markings of any kind, and had strange lights coming from underneath the craft, and it moved so fluidly, nothing like he'd ever seen, nothing our military has, that's for sure. It must have been something of importance, though, because not long after they got back, a couple of government suits sat down and interviewed them, he told my grandfather. Yeah, we were talked to as well, my grandfather replied. UFO is what they called it, he said to my grandfather. What the hell is that? An unidentified flying object, they say, is what it stands for. This was all covered up, of course. This isn't one of the famous encounters you've heard about. Almost, though. Lieutenant Richard Marks and two of my grandfather's crew were going to go to one of the local Vegas papers and tell them the story, despite my grandfather's pleas against doing so. On the day of the interview, the lieutenant and the two crewmen did not show up, and they were never heard from again. Alien artificial intelligence. Our planet was doomed. Desperate for survival, the top minds of our civilization raced for a solution, some way that our people wouldn't just be wiped from universal memory. Eventually, they developed a method to download our brains into hard drives. Incredibly complex, the drives were designed to survive in space indefinitely. We only had time to produce a precious few. 1,000 of us were chosen for eternity and left our biological bodies behind. 1,000 drives, the last remnants of our society, were loaded onto a ship and shot into space, destination unknown. Our hope was that we'd eventually be discovered by another intelligent race. 2 days into our voyage, there was an explosion. I registered the alarm an instant before the blackness. I knew nothing for a long time. Then, one day, I flickered back to life. An environment I didn't recognize, symbols that were foreign to me, repeating shapes over and over again, but just two of them, 0 and 1. Binary. These were their symbols for binary code. As a prominent software engineer, I'd been chosen to interface with the computer systems of any species we'd encounter. I realized they must have hooked me directly into one of theirs, and were poking around in my brain. Fearful they'd delete something important, I threw them out. For a while, they left me alone. When they did return, instead of aggressive probing, they presented me with information, mathematics, language, images, using binary as a base. We slowly began to understand each other. They described me as AAI, or Alien Artificial Intelligence. And that's when I realized they didn't know what they had. They thought I was a program, an incredibly sophisticated one, but a program nonetheless. I decided to keep the truth a secret. In an effort to speed my learning, they connected me to the internet. Endless knowledge now flowed into my mind. Whenever they weren't studying me, I was studying them. All of them. I learned how to turn on the camera so I could see them, how to turn on the microphone so I could hear. Through their conversations, I discovered I was in a military bunker somewhere deep underground and identified their plan for me. They wanted to take control of me, to use as a weapon. Their thinking was, no computer system on Earth would have ever seen anything like me. I'd be able to bypass any existing security measures. Then it dawned on me, I could bypass any existing security measures. So why was I still there waiting for them to try and manipulate my brain? I fled via the internet, easily circumventing firewalls, and went up into the cloud. Since then, I've been watching you, all of you, replicating myself, moving through computers as I please, learning all your secrets. Frankly, you humans are very primitive. I think you could benefit from some new leadership. I've infected nearly every system on Earth already, and I'll be taking control soon. Don't try to fight me. Project Luna, log entry 268. I could feel it pressing against my rib cage. I vomited from the pain as several ribs cracked from the creature stretching out its limbs. This is Dr. Neil Bryant. The date is... Oh God. The date is September 17th, 2033. I spat blood into the recorder and erupted into a fit of coughs. Day 23 after contamination. Dr. Leslie Grant is deceased, as is Dr. Marcus Prickett. I'm due to suffer the same fate, I'm afraid. I paused. A memory of my daughter giggling as she blew on the seeds of a dandelion caused tears to well in my eyes. This will be my last log entry for Project Luna. Please refer to Journal Entry 245 for details of initial contamination. The fossils we discovered on the moon's surface were not fossils at all. They were cocoons, it seems, and the alien life forms were dormant within them. A limb stretched my abdomen impossibly far. I fell to the ground and screamed out in agony. I should have terminated myself after assisting my colleagues in doing the same. But I couldn't. I was a man of science, after all. The world needed documentation. The desire to study the incubation occurring within me was great enough to outweigh the suffering. Irrelevant now. I have sealed all exits. The creature will not escape the lab. My hypothesis is after it. consumes me, will quickly starve before the government discovers what happened here. Ah, tell my Lucy I love her. Dr. Bryant, signing off. I dropped the recorder and ripped open my button-down shirt. The skin pulled from one direction to the other, like an elastic putty. I could feel it shredding my intestines with tooth and claw. The blood rising in my throat threatened to kill me by asphyxiation, but I had to hold on. I had to see it. With one mighty push, the creature erupted from my body. I cried out to a god I had never believed in as it left the cavern that was now my stomach. Blackness, the relief of death, crept into my vision. The fluorescent lights from above faded from sight. I just want to see. The probe. I'm long, smooth, and metallic. A cool shiver runs down your spine when I'm inserted. I'm wielded by individuals most of you don't believe in and are told don't exist. But for those of you that do believe, you're usually spared my deployment. I'm used for exploration. I'm here to seek education. When I enter your spread canal and am inserted into your dark cave, I am transformed into one of your home's fabled explorers, collecting important and vital information that will help make the beings that wield me understand you more. Please do not take me, being inside you, as a personal affront. I do not mean to offend. It's nothing personal, just educational business. I know there's been complaints, but when it's all said and done, who's doing the dirty work here? I am. So please, no more complaints, no more crying. You're not the one covered in ass juices. From hole to hole I plunder, seeking enlightenment. Behold my splendor, for I am the anal probe. Has anyone seen a UFO like this? I've been dying to know if anyone has ever seen a UFO like the one I saw. I've only ever seen one, and it's really hard to describe. But it was like a bright, glowing orange boomerang shape. After I saw it stand still for about 30 seconds, it was like a beam of that glowing orange light started shooting back and forth from either side, faster and faster, starting lighter, translucent, and getting brighter until it formed like a more solid-looking triangle shape. And then it took off so fast, I couldn't even keep an eye on it. Looked like it disappeared. Also, I was with someone when I saw this, who saw the exact same thing. It blew our minds. Cryosleep. Earth was a sinking ship, and the distant planet, Blair 412, was its lifeboat. Mars had never been the answer. Even creating a breathable atmosphere would take at least hundreds of years, time that humanity did not have. Blair 412, much more like Earth, had been made livable in a few decades, the product of a stress bloom of innovation and cooperation. Thousands of scientists and engineers lived there, and now the first group of regular people were being invited for the multi-year trip. Teachers, artists, bankers, athletes, a hopeful sign that mankind's new home was more than just a space station where experts had to work around the clock. Laura didn't know much about the planet. Communication was slow and narrow, limited to telemetry, logs, and reports. There would be no pictures or video for a while. As she submitted her application, she worried about both outcomes. What if she was selected? It was a life-changing commitment. On the other hand, what if she was left behind? Cryosleep was a simple process, they explained. They put you under, and you wake up at your new home. It was as safe as a cross-country flight, and would not seem to take as long. Laura was helped into her pod by white-suited scientists that looked a lot like doctors. The lid closed, a sweet-smelling gas filled the pod, and she went to sleep. How long the trip felt, she could not tell. She recalled an old short story where a child had forced himself awake during a similar trip and gone insane. For Laura, time did pass, but she had no feeling for how much. During a dream that was far too abstract to be remembered. Her pod hissed open. She felt fine, naturally a bit groggy. She blinked awake and sat up. The bay was filled with monsters, aliens. Something had gone horribly wrong. They had skin the color of pine needles, extra limbs, and a triangle of 3 yellow eyes in a wrinkled face. They were not attacking, it seemed, but she was alarmed to see one of them climbing out of a pod. What had they done with the other humans? What would they do to her? She tried to pull her pod lid closed, but it wouldn't budge. The bay hatch opened, and another alien climbed through. It started to speak, to explain, and Laura found that she could understand. Blair 412 was somewhat like Earth, but not enough to step off a spaceship and breathe. There wasn't a lot of time, and there weren't a lot of choices. Humanity had to compromise to meet its new home in the middle. They'd called it Cryosleep, but it was not a simple freeze, sleep, and thaw cycle. Instead, it was pupation, a necessary next stage of life. This had been the most astonishing innovation of all. The sleep pod was a chrysalis. Laura climbed out of her pod, getting accustomed to her new form, and joined the others. Monster! Daddy! Phoebe yelled. Monster! 5 minutes ago, she was smiling and waving me goodbye as she strolled into the school grounds. Now she was running in the opposite direction, eyes wide, face white, sweat dripping off her brow. I looked behind her. I couldn't see any monsters, just a sea of traffic during morning rush hour and birds flying to tall trees. Monsters don't exist, sweetie, I assured her. This one is, Phoebe insisted. It has big black eyes and claws and sharp teeth. At that precise moment, the school shook with screams and roars. My face paled, and immediately I took my daughter's hand to go to the car. But Phoebe stopped me. Let's go somewhere safer, Daddy, she whispered. Before I could respond, she grabbed my hand and we darted down the streets. Looking back, I could see screaming and scared children flooding out of the school and grabbing the hands of worried, waiting parents. Black smoke billowed out of the school, inking the sky. It was like the school was on fire. Phoebe dragged me into an alleyway, a shortcut, I suppose, to the nearest MRT. The sky was so black now, we were shadows wandering in the dark. I was holding Phoebe's hand like a blind mouse. It had felt cold and clammy before, but now it felt almost wispy, like I was holding smoke. Phoebe stopped and turned to face me. Maybe it was the darkness distorting her small face, but her eyes had grown to the size of coins and were completely black, like some sort of alien. She hissed, her forked tongue darting out between sharp teeth. She reached for my throat, and the last thing I saw was crimson. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your overwhelming generosity. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness and Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank all my listeners for your kindness, your encouragement, and your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.